All right, welcome to another deep dive. This time we're going deep into the world of psychoanalytic therapy.
Oh, interesting.
We've got a really diverse collection of sources for this one, some YouTube lectures, and even a peek into how therapists prep for a big national exam.
Hmm, that's fascinating. You know, we're diving into a theory that's been debated for ages, but it's definitely shaped the way we think about the mind.
Yeah, it's pretty huge. And it all starts with this guy, Sigmund Freud.
Of course, Freud.
So Freud was born in Vienna, the oldest of 8 kids. He had this strict father and a very doting mother. And that's pretty significant, right?
Right.
Because in psychoanalytic theory says those really early experiences have a big impact on who we become as adults.
Definitely, those early relationships are crucial. And what's really interesting is that Freud himself had some emotional struggles when he was in his 40s.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that's important because it probably shaped his ideas about the unconscious mind.
So the experiences of the person who came up with the theory matter too, right?
Exactly. He wasn't just theorizing in a vacuum, right? His own struggles probably contributed to how he thought about the unconscious influencing us.
So it's not just nature versus nurture, it's also the person who's doing the theorizing.
Exactly. And when we talk about the unconscious, Freud also talked about this thing called libido, this psychic energy that drives our instincts.
Libido, so we're talking about the sex drive.
Well, not just that, it's more than just that.
Oh, okay.
It's like this primal energy, that pushes us towards life, like, things like love and creativity and connection, but also towards death, like aggression, destructive behaviors.
This is where it starts to get interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so Freud believed that libido plays out in our personalities through these things: id, ego, and superego.
Yep, those are the big three.
It's like having 3 voices in your head, each with their own agenda.
Haha, that's a good way to put it. Think of the id like the impulsive child, always demanding immediate gratification, operating on the pleasure principle.
The id wants what it wants.
Exactly. I want it and I want it now. And then you have the ego.
The ego's trying to keep things in check.
Yeah, the ego is like the practical adult in the room, trying to balance those primal urges from the id with the demands of reality.
And the superego. That's like the strict parent.
Exactly. Internalizing all those societal morals and values, it's where guilt and self-criticism come from.
So we have this inner child, the adult, and the parent, all battling it out.
It's an internal power struggle.
So how does this struggle actually play out in our everyday lives?
Well, imagine you're craving like a giant piece of chocolate cake that's your id screaming for pleasure.
I know that feeling.
But your ego knows you're trying to eat healthy, so it's like maybe a smaller slice, or how about some fruit?
Okay, I can see that.
And then the superego chimes in and makes you feel guilty for even thinking about the cake.
I can totally relate to that. It's like these different parts of us are in constant negotiation.
Absolutely, and sometimes those negotiations get pretty heated.
This makes me think about how we have those inner dialogues with ourselves.
Absolutely. And when these different parts are in conflict, that's where anxiety comes in.
Ah, anxiety, the fun part.
Yeah. Freud actually identified 3 types of anxiety: reality anxiety, the fear of actual danger in the world; neurotic anxiety, the fear of our id impulses taking over.
Like completely losing control.
Yeah, and moral anxiety, the fear of violating our superego's moral code.
So we're constantly trying to manage all this inner tension.
Exactly. And that's where defense mechanisms come into play.
Defense mechanisms, those are interesting.
They're like unconscious strategies that our ego develops to protect us from feeling too much anxiety.
Okay, I'm following.
They're like mental shields that kind of distort reality or redirect those uncomfortable feelings.
Can you give me an example of what a defense mechanism looks like?
Sure, let's say you're secretly jealous of a friend's success.
That's a tough one.
So instead of admitting to those feelings, you might shower them with excessive praise.
Oh, so it's like overcompensating.
Exactly. You're expressing the opposite of your true feelings to avoid that discomfort. That's called reaction formation.
Wow, that's fascinating. So are defense mechanisms always a bad thing?
Not necessarily. I mean, they can be helpful, especially in managing stress or difficult situations, especially in the short term.
Oh, so it's like a temporary coping strategy.
Yeah, but if we overuse them, they can prevent us from really facing reality and working through those difficult emotions.
So the key is to become aware of those unconscious patterns.
Yes, awareness is key.
And understand how they might be impacting our lives. But how do we even access this unconscious world in the first place? It's like trying to explore a vast underwater landscape.
Yeah, it's a deep dive. And that's where psychoanalytic therapy comes in, which we'll explore in our next part.
Stay tuned, folks. The deep dive continues. All right, welcome back, deep divers. So last time we were talking about that big question, how do we actually access this unconscious world? It's like trying to explore a vast underwater landscape,
It's
right?
exactly a
Yeah.
deep dive. And that's where psychoanalytic therapy comes in.
Makes sense.
It gives us the tools, like the diving gear, to explore those depths.
Okay.
One of the most well-known techniques is free association.
Free association.
Yeah, the client just says whatever pops into their mind,
Okay.
no matter how random or embarrassing it might seem.
Oh, wow.
It's like a stream of consciousness.
So just letting those thoughts flow, no filter.
Exactly. It's about getting past those conscious defenses and tapping into the raw material of the unconscious mind.
And speaking of defenses, we were talking about them earlier, those
Right.
mental shields that protect us from anxiety.
Yeah.
So those can show up in therapy too.
Oh, absolutely. They're often unconscious, so we might not even realize we're using them.
Okay.
For example, a client might avoid certain topics,
Right.
or maybe they're always late, or they forget important details.
Oh, so they're resisting the process?
Yeah, in a way.
So even those little annoying behaviors, those could actually be clues,
Exactly. It's like the therapist is a detective.
like piecing together a mystery.
Exactly. They're piecing together these clues to understand the client's inner world.
I like that analogy.
And then there's transference.
Transference, that's where things get really interesting.
Yeah, it's when the client starts reacting to the therapist as if they were someone from their past.
Okay, like a parent or an ex.
Exactly. Maybe even a teacher or a sibling.
So it's not just what the client says, it's how they interact with the therapist.
Right, those patterns of relating.
They can reveal a lot.
Yeah, a lot about their unconscious dynamics.
Mm.
So, for example, a client who is constantly seeking approval from the therapist.
Always looking for validation.
Right. They might be reenacting a pattern from childhood.
Oh, like needing validation from a parent.
Exactly. It's like their past is playing out right there in the therapy room.
Wow, that's intense.
It can be, but it allows the therapist to help the client understand.
To work through those patterns.
Exactly, in a safe and supportive environment.
Okay, so we've got these techniques like free association, dream analysis. We're watching for defense mechanisms and transference.
We're looking for those patterns.
What's the overall goal? What are we trying to achieve in psychoanalytic therapy?
Well, the ultimate goal is to make the unconscious conscious.
To make the unconscious conscious.
Yeah, it's about bringing those hidden thoughts and feelings into awareness
Okay,
so they can be understood and processed.
so it's like shining a light into those dark corners of our mind.
Exactly, bringing those unconscious patterns into the light.
Then we can start to understand how they're influencing us.
Yes, and that awareness, that's the first step towards change.
This makes me think about those times when I suddenly realize a pattern in my own behavior.
Oh, yeah.
Like, maybe always attracting a certain type of partner or constantly self-sabotaging my success.
It's like you can't unsee it once you see it.
Exactly.
And that's the power of insight. It can be incredibly liberating to understand the why behind our struggles.
I can imagine.
It's like a weight has been lifted.
So awareness is just the first step, right? What happens next? How do we actually change those deep-seated patterns?
Well, that's where the real work of therapy begins, right?
The real work begins.
It's not about erasing those patterns altogether.
Okay.
I mean, they probably served a purpose at some point.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's about understanding them,
Okay.
accepting them, and then learning to work with them in a more conscious and adaptive way.
So it's not about getting rid of those parts of ourselves. It's more about integrating them.
Exactly. It's about creating a more harmonious relationship between the id, ego, and superego.
Like those three voices we were talking about.
Right. Remember the child, the adult, and the parent. Imagine if those three were always fighting.
Oh, that'd be chaos.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So the goal is to help the client develop a more balanced and integrated sense of self.
Where those different parts can work together.
Yeah, more effectively.
This reminds me of those inner child workshops I've heard about,
Yeah, I know what you mean.
where people try to connect with and heal those younger parts of themselves.
It has a similar vibe. It's about acknowledging and validating those different parts of ourselves.
Yeah, even the messy ones.
Exactly.
This makes so much sense when you think about how many of our adult struggles come from those unresolved childhood experiences.
Right. And while psychoanalytic therapy doesn't focus solely on childhood, those early experiences often hold clues.
Clues to understanding our present-day patterns.
Exactly. It's like we're archaeologists,
Digging into the past.
Yeah, digging into the layers of our past to uncover those artifacts that are shaping our present.
I like that.
And speaking of digging,
Oh, we're talking about dream analysis?
yeah, dream analysis, it's like diving even deeper into those unconscious depths while we sleep.
Dreams, they can be so strange.
They are. Dreams are like a direct line to the unconscious mind.
Okay.
They bypass those conscious defenses,
Interesting.
and they speak in this symbolic language.
But how do we make sense of all those strange images? It's
Yeah.
like trying to decipher a code.
Well, that's where the therapist's expertise comes in.
Okay.
They can help guide the client in exploring the personal meaning behind those dream symbols.
So it's not about looking up a dream dictionary or something.
No, not at all. It's about the unique meaning those symbols hold for the individual.
Makes sense.
So the therapist might ask things like, what comes to mind when you think about that image? Or, what feelings did you experience during the dream?
It's about exploring and interpreting.
Exactly. It's a collaborative process.
This reminds me of those ink blot tests,
Oh, yeah.
where different people see different things depending on their experiences.
That's a great analogy.
Yeah, it's the subjective nature of interpretation, right?
Exactly. There's no one right answer.
Okay, so we've got free association, dream analysis. We're watching for defenses and transference.
Right. Those are some of the key tools.
And we're working towards greater awareness and integration.
It's a process.
But what about the actual therapy process itself? What can someone expect when they go into this type of therapy?
Well, first of all, psychoanalytic therapy, it's a long-term commitment.
It's not a quick fix, huh?
No, not at all.
Hmm?
It often takes months, even years.
To really dig into those patterns.
Exactly. It's about deep, transformative work.
Okay,
Sessions usually happen like once or twice a week,
got it.
and the client usually lies on a couch.
Ah, the classic couch. Why the couch, though?
Well, it's thought to facilitate relaxation and introspection
Okay.
by not having to make direct eye contact with the therapist.
Yeah,
The client can feel more comfortable letting their thoughts flow freely.
without feeling self-conscious.
Right. It's about creating a safe space.
A private space for those thoughts and feelings to emerge.
Exactly. Now, the therapist's role is pretty unique.
In what way?
They're not giving advice or offering solutions.
Okay.
It's more about listening attentively,
Listening.
observing patterns, and offering interpretations that help the client make connections.
So they're more like a guide,
Yeah,
helping the client navigate their own inner landscape.
Exactly. They're like a Sherpa.
Oh, I like that. Guiding them through the mountains of the mind.
Exactly. Now, of course, the client also has an important role.
They're not just passively lying there.
No, not at all. They need to be willing to be vulnerable.
Vulnerable.
Yeah, to delve into those uncomfortable or painful parts of themselves.
That takes courage.
It does. They also need to be open to exploring their dreams, their memories, and their patterns of relating.
So it's an active process.
Yeah, and they need to be okay with uncertainty and ambiguity because, the journey of self-discovery, it's rarely a straight line.
Definitely not a straight line.
But for those who are willing to dive deep, the rewards can be really profound.
It sounds like quite the adventure. We've covered a lot, but I'm curious.
Yeah.
Are there any specific mental health conditions that psychoanalytic therapy is especially good for treating?
Well, it can be helpful for a wide range of issues,
Okay.
but it's often particularly effective for people who are struggling with, those deep-seated patterns of relating.
Relationship problems.
Yeah, or for those who are just seeking a deeper understanding of themselves and their motivations.
Makes sense.
It can also be helpful for addressing anxiety, depression, trauma, and personality disorders.
So it's not just about symptom relief.
No, it's about understanding the underlying dynamics.
The root causes.
Exactly. And helping the client develop a more integrated and adaptive sense of self.
This is fascinating stuff, but I think we're going to have to pause our deep dive here for now.
Okay.
We've explored the techniques, the goals, the therapeutic process,
Yeah.
even gotten a glimpse into those unique roles of both the therapist and the client.
It's been quite a journey.
But there's still so much more to uncover.
Right.
So in our next part, we'll explore the legacy of psychoanalytic therapy, its last contributions.
Its limitations, too.
Yeah, both the good and the bad.
We'll see how it's evolved and where it stands in today's world.
Stay tuned, folks. The deep dive continues. All right, welcome back, deep divers. We've been on quite a journey, exploring the unconscious, those Freudian concepts like id, ego, superego.
Oh, it's been a fascinating deep dive.
Yeah. We even unpack therapy techniques like free association, dream analysis.
Those are powerful tools.
But now I think it's time to come up for air. Look at the bigger picture. The legacy of psychoanalytic therapy.
Yeah, good idea.
What are its lasting contributions? Where does it fall short? Because I know there's been a lot of debate around Freud and his theories.
Absolutely. There's definitely been some controversy. I think one of the biggest criticisms is that, traditional psychoanalytic theory can feel very focused on the individual's inner world.
Okay, so it's very inward-looking.
Yeah, and it almost neglects the impact of those social and cultural factors, like the environment someone's in.
So it's like looking at the tree without considering the forest it grows in.
Exactly. Like for someone facing systemic barriers,
Yeah,
right?
right.
Things like racism or sexism.
Those have a huge impact.
Oh, absolutely. Those external forces have a huge impact on their mental health.
And traditional psychoanalysis might miss that.
Yeah, it might not fully address that piece.
That makes sense. It's like saying, someone's anxiety is purely from those childhood conflicts,
Right.
when in reality they're dealing with tons of stressors in their current life.
Exactly. And then there's a criticism around the overemphasis on the mother's role.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Sometimes even bordering on blame.
That's problematic.
Yeah, especially considering how much things have changed, like in terms of parenting roles and family structures.
So context is key.
Absolutely. The world has changed a lot since Freud's time.
And while those core concepts might still be relevant, we need to be mindful of those limitations.
Exactly. But let's not forget about those amazing contributions, right?
Yeah. What did Freud get right?
Well, his work really revolutionized how we think about the mind. The very concept of the unconscious, this whole hidden world driving our behavior,
Yeah, that was groundbreaking.
it was revolutionary.
Even people who don't know anything about psychoanalysis, they use terms like Freudian slip, or they talk about defense mechanisms.
It's true. His ideas have really become part of our everyday language.
Yeah, they've permeated our culture.
Absolutely. And while, specific Freudian concepts like those psychosexual stages, those aren't as widely accepted today.
Yeah.
But that general idea that early childhood experiences shape us, that's huge.
Makes you think about how those early relationships really lay the foundation.
Oh, they're crucial for our emotional development.
And that's influenced everything.
So many fields. Parenting, education, you name it.
Even if you don't buy into everything Freud said,
Right.
that emphasis on early childhood has had a huge ripple effect.
It's undeniable. And hey, remember those studies we were talking about? The ones about subliminal messages?
Oh yeah, the ones that influence behavior without us even knowing.
Exactly. That's evidence for the unconscious at work.
We wouldn't have those findings without Freud.
No way. He really paved the way for that kind of research.
It's like he gave us a new lens for understanding behavior.
Exactly. Even if the lens itself might need a little adjusting over time.
That's a great way to put it. Psychology, like any field, it's always evolving, right?
Has to.
We're always learning and refining our understanding.
Absolutely. And psychoanalytic therapy itself has branched out too.
Oh, interesting. In what way?
Well, it's led to all sorts of different schools of thought, different approaches.
So it's not like this one fixed thing.
No, not at all. It's more like a tree with many branches.
I like that. Drawing on those Freudian principles, but adapting them.
Exactly. And while some might argue that psychoanalytic therapy is a bit outdated,
Yeah, I could see that argument.
it's still practiced and studied today.
Really?
Oh, yeah. Those core concepts, things like the unconscious, defense mechanisms, transference.
They still hold up.
Yeah, they can still offer valuable insights.
So it's not about clinging to every single Freudian idea,
Right.
but recognizing what's still relevant.
And adapting those principles to fit our current understanding of the mind.
That's the beauty of it. Kind of like those deep divers we talked about.
Aha, exactly.
We're always exploring, uncovering new layers, refining our understanding.
It's a continuous process.
It's been quite the journey exploring all this.
Yeah.
From those early Freudian concepts to the therapy process itself.
We've covered a lot of ground.
We have. I think the biggest takeaway for me is that the human psyche is this vast, mysterious landscape.
Oh, it is. And there's always more to discover.
And that willingness to explore, to dive deep, to ask the tough questions,
That's what keeps us learning and growing.
both as individuals and as a society.
Absolutely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, we want to encourage you to keep exploring
Keep those questions coming.
and keep seeking out those aha moments that illuminate the world within us and around us.
Maybe this deep dive has sparked your own curiosity about those hidden depths inside yourself.
That would be wonderful.
After all, as Freud himself said, the interpretation of dreams is the royal road to a knowledge of the unconscious activities of the mind.
That's a great quote. So until next time, fellow deep divers, keep exploring those hidden landscapes.
And let's continue to unravel the mysteries of the mind together.
Absolutely.